to order the Little Miami Local School Board's regular meeting December 11th. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Grice?
Here.
Mr. Femines?
Here.
Mr. Haas?
Here.
Mr. Siebert?
Here.
Mr. Nay?
Here.
Thank you.
If everyone to stand to say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please.
Okay, at this time, we need a motion to adopt the agenda that you have before you.
I move.
Ms. Grace, Mr. Femines. Roll call, please.
Mr. Haas?
Yes.
Mr. Nay?
Yes.
Mr. Cremines?
Yes.
Ms. Grice?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes. Okay, at this time, we need a motion for the reading of the minutes, November 27, 2018 regular meeting. So moved. Mr. Siebert?
I'll second.
Ms. Janae? Roll call, please.
Mr. Nay?
Yes.
Mr. Cremines?
Yes.
Ms. Grice?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Haas?
Yes. Okay, at this time, communications and our visitors to the board. Mr. Connor?
Good evening. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas, sir.
Christmas.
A couple of items. Update on our board office. We are complete at the board office as far as construction goes. There are a few punch list items. And furniture delivery is projected for January the 7th. So we're all looking forward to January the 7th and getting the furniture into the offices and starting the move process. I think HR, we've got our internet hookup is active down there, and HR is already starting to pack up to make their move. So right after the first of the year, I anticipate that HR is going to be relocating. You have some handouts that been provided. The one's an enrollment update. I think the latest one today that just came out, I think we're at 5,007, 5,004. Barry's given you a 5-year forecast that reflects the draft staffing plan that I'm about to talk about. And I'd like to take a few minutes just to kind of review the format of the staffing plan. It's this legal size handout that I gave to you. This is formatted in a very similar manner to the staffing plans that we've done for the last few years. What you see on the first page, after the front page, is a listing of staff by building, different job categories, and the numbers of staff is currently assigned. The next line under that is a summary listing of some projected staff changing by building based on what we're looking at with rolling the current enrollment up from one grade level to the next and looking at what our staffing needs would be as the graduating class graduates and as those grade levels roll up. And so the proposed staffing pretty much will cover the existing student enrollment as of today, and we'll continue to monitor growth through the year to see whether we need to make additional staff changes. On the third page, you'll see basically a summary of instructional practices, cultural efforts, mental health supports, and professional growth goals by building. Those are tied to the administrator evaluations at each building. There are 2 growth goals that you will see that start on the bottom of that page, and then they flow through onto the next page. Underneath that on the next page, you'll see projected building budgets. There really haven't been any changes as to per student funding. We're maintaining that, not seeking to increase that at this point in time. Under that, you'll see a summary of some support operations staff and the numbers of support operations staff we have in transportation, food service, custodians, maintenance, grounds, and in our technology area. And then you'll see some changes listed in the support operations area. You'll see Rachel is doing some adding and subtracting with some 2.5 and 3 hour cooks, and then she is looking at a kitchen manager that she wants to increase by an hour for next year. Just as a point of information, Rachel has a separate budgeting framework that doesn't impact operating our food service dollars. Surplus that we have there, we can only spend in the food service area. And the next page pretty much gives a final summary of ads that we want to look at. And I've taken underneath the green box there, there's a net addition position under certified, classified, and exempt. So you'll see what we're projecting is an increase in 2.5 certified positions for next year, 1.14 positions in classified, and 1 exempt position for next year. And underneath that is a summary of the positions that we're projecting that we would like to add. A halftime art. We already have a halftime art at the high school, and we would simply be increasing that same individual position to a full-time position, and that's basically due to increasing enrollment as a smaller graduating class goes out and a bigger incoming 8th grade class comes in. We've got some fine-tuning to do with staffing needs as our student population continues to grow at the high school. An additional science at the high school. A gifted intervention specialist. Right now, we contract a lot of gifted support services outside the district, and we would like to bring that in with a gifted intervention teacher who could better support and provide PD and support our gifted students. We're also looking at adding an intervention specialist. This intervention specialist position would be at the high school. Within the last year, there's been some increasing regulatory requirements to do more transition activities with our high school special ed kids, and so that's as a result of some mandated additional responsibilities that go beyond what our typical intervention specialists do. We're seeking to add an assistant athletic director, and there's some supporting documentation for the gifted and the athletic director positions that are in the back of this packet for you to review over the next month. When you look at the amount of activities and the increased growth in our athletic program, that's a recommendation that we'd like to make to the board, that we bring on an assistant athletic director. Related to the next one is a Class 3 secretary for preschool. Over the last couple years, preschool has, in a public school, has evolved to where a lot of the regulatory requirements and guidance, attendance, everything around that, supporting students clerically in a preschool is very different from our K-12 framework. That, Aaron, I think that's out of Job and Family Services. We get a lot of Armida speaking. It's a completely other entity outside of the Ohio Department of Education that regulates preschools, and now public preschools are under that regulation. So the 5-star step up, the quality assessment framework, all of that is something that has been brought in and layered over public preschools. It's a very different animal, and there's a lot of need for support there in the preschool framework. And then that 0.14 FTE cook is that additional hour to a head cook that Rachel would like to add. As we look at our enrollment and we look at grade levels rolling up, there is over at Mainville, as we look at the sections and the number of students, we're looking to reduce 1 first grade and not replace that at this point. And then as we look at shifting staff as grade levels shift, we're looking at transferring 2 third-grade staff to 4th grade to support the student-teacher ratio at 4th grade as we have a smaller 3rd grade coming in from 2nd grade. And then shifting 1 5th grade to 6th grade as we have some cohort size differences with the 5th and 6th grade as well. And of course, with everything, we will continue to monitor and look at and make modifications on that support side. Another thing we added this year is we started to look at what our future needs might be in future fiscal years. You can see another table that is immediately to the right on that same page, looking at some possible positions in the future that we anticipate a need for as we continue to grow and as we open in fiscal year 21 the new spaces. So that's just there as a reference point for you to look at what might be coming in the future. We'll be going from a 6-building configuration to a 5-building configuration once we have the renovations, additions, and the new pre-K 1 completed. And that'll cause some shift in staff responsibilities as we also continue to grow.
Mr. Power, where would the gifted intervention specialist, would she work with all the grades, or would she?
Yeah, that would be a district position, a district gifted certified teacher. And then on the following pages, is some data for you related to some of the positions. On the next page, you'll see what we're looking at in the way of responsibilities for the gifted intervention specialist. And then you'll also see the responsibilities of the preschool secretary. The page after that contains, the next couple of pages contain data around some comparative data and around our student athletes and around area school districts related to how they staff and support their extracurricular athletic programs. We're anticipating that the cost factor on an assistant AD, that AD would start somewhere around $54,000 a year on a 225-day contract. And Terry's incorporated all of the costs of the staff that we're recommending into the 5-year that you have. Would ask that maybe that you take the next month. We would anticipate coming back to the board with an agenda item at the regular January board meeting. And if you have questions between now and then, you could let me know if there's more information that you need or detail. We could gather that for you and provide that to you between now and then.
Just want to remind the board also, all the other assumptions from the October forecast remain the same, other than the staffing for the fiscal year 20.
So this, Terry, the additions that we see here have been incorporated in these numbers?
Correct, they're in fiscal year 20.
Okay.
Everything else remains the same from October's forecast.
Okay.
And the next item, I talked to several of the board members prior to the board meeting. Yesterday, we had a day-long planning session with our architect from Origin Design. And over the last, December 3rd, December 5th, we were out touring buildings. We had about 32 staff, teachers, parents. Nancy went on that tour as well. We went to, Terry was out there too, walking through classrooms and looking at space. We looked at, on the 3rd, we traveled to Middletown and looked at Middletown High School and Middletown Middle School. Middletown Middle School is a brand new middle school, and Middletown High School is a renovated high school with additions. We then traveled over to Northwest and visited a brand new K-5 elementary, Taylor Elementary at Northwest Schools. They actually built 3 new elementaries over at Northwest, all exactly the same. They took and made a design and made 900 student elementaries. And then we had occasion to look at Sycamore High School, they're starting on the front end of the renovation process for their existing high school. We looked at renovated science spaces, and also they have the luxury of having 2 theaters at their high school, One which was the original smaller theater, and they did about a $250,000 renovation on that, and turned that into a flex learning space. They call it their Cinovation Center. It's really a pretty interesting circumstance. It was the second time I'd had the opportunity to go over there, talk to students that were involved in that programming. And then on the 5th, we chartered a Croswell bus, and we took a ride about 130 miles down into Kentucky, and we toured a place called Eminence Independent Schools in the city of Eminence. Doing pretty good. And this was a renovation, remodel, and an addition on an existing school that had at one point in time been a K-12 school of about 450 kids, and they're now a school of over 900. And in Kentucky, the kids pretty much come and go between county schools and the independent school system. They were, several years ago, a dying little independent school because of the programming and their approach. So they really made a commitment basically to try to create space that would enhance and make kids feel like you feel when you walk in the gates of Disney World. There's a 2-story slide that you walk into when you walk into their space, and the kids come up and down from the first and the second floor on that slide. It's a K-12 building. It was very interesting to see how they renovated older space and then how they incorporated the newer learning flex spaces and labs into that space, and they then integrated technology as well. It was a great day. I think it was time well spent. A lot of the staff, I know Nancy was, it was really, a few of us got to take a little trip down the slide too, so it's a pretty fast slide as the slides go. My 3-year-old grandson was going to fall with it, we were attempting to gain some perspective and framework. We got to talk with superintendents and teachers and students, so those were some times well spent. I think we'll probably, as we continue, probably look at some other places to visit as we move through this process. With that in mind, yesterday was our first planning session where we did bring staff in to work with our architects to begin to look at what are the possibilities and what are the challenges around making our additions and building our new pre-K-1 building. And I think it would be really a very good thing for our board if the architects came in and did something very similar with you in a work session. So I would suggest our organizational meeting is January the 8th at 6:30. And I would suggest that perhaps after the January 8th organizational meeting, if we could take an hour and a half or two to sit with our architect and go through a very similar process as we went through yesterday with our staff. I think that would be time well spent. We're in a pretty tight timeline if we're going to look at getting, for example, the intermediate edition available for space before we hit 2021. So I think probably the next 4 to 6 weeks are very pivotal and key in our having those conversations. We did have some conversation, I mentioned to Randy, about the tariff circumstance and politically in the international circumstance, and we've gotten some feedback that is impacting pricing on what we can spend to build, and that cost of construction is significantly increasing. So with our finite dollars, I think we're going to probably be in some circumstances where we have to ask and answer some difficult questions. As we move through the process, the one thing that we've tried to keep our focus on is, yes, we have buildings where we're making additions where we are looking at what supports the learning for the students who are currently in that learning space, but the end, we have to keep the end in mind that what that building is going to end up being. If we think about this building, for example, right now it's supporting our 5th and 6th grade kids, but in the end, when we go to the next phase, this building needs to support second and third grade kids. When we think about our junior high, currently it's supporting our seventh and eighth grade kids, and eventually it will support our sixth grade kid, but eventually our junior high is going to become a 3-5 building, and eventually after that, a 1-5 building. So as we make changes and we make renovations, it's important to think about where we're going to end up. And if there's something there that current supports kids there now but won't support kids in the end, do we add it or don't we add it at this point in time? So those are some of the challenges that we face. My thought would be later in January, after we have moved through some of the processes and we come up with some concepts, that we update our staff and some after-school meetings, and that we also hold a community meeting probably in that third or fourth week in January to give the community an update and give them a chance also to give us some feedback.
Good idea.
So on the 8th, the organizational meeting, and then we also do the budget.
Yeah, the budget hearing and the
Budget hearing.
organizational meeting.
Organizational, and then how long do you?
I would say no more than a 2-hour special work session, a special Board of Ed meeting work session.
Yeah.
After the organizational
Hearing.
meeting. On
Yeah.
January.
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 Yeah, that's fine, I got that down.
We'll go ahead and get that scheduled in and make arrangements for it.
Sounds good.
And at this point, that's all I have.
Dinner will be served, right, Rachel? She didn't hear.
Providing food.
Yes.
Rachel can
I said
provide
dinner
food, yeah.
will be provided, right?
What's that? Sure, absolutely.
Okay,
Brought a bag.
Email me what you'd like to have and I'll deliver it.
you're a good
Oh, we
person.
will. Especially those cookies.
Hey, Randy, sort of brief the board real quick on the sale of bonds.
Just,
Okay, when we get, I'm going to ask you about that. when we
Oh, okay.
get to that. Thank you very much. Budget. Okay, thank
Thank
you very
you.
much, Mr. Power. Are there any community comments on agenda items?
George Clemens.
Mr. Clemens?
I'll pass.
You want the microphone?
Nope, I just want to make sure.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you don't need to say.
No, I just wanted to see if anybody else was here, but I'll go.
We're glad you're here.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, well, thank you very much. All right, thank you, Mr. Clemens.
So you're not gonna say anything, huh?
No, I was going to say something, but folks that I thought were going to be attending were not here, so.
All
right.
right, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. All right, at this time, we will entertain the treasurer's reports and financial reports, and also, Mr. Gonda, if you could bring everybody that into the fold on the bonds.
Absolutely.
And,
Yeah, I'll go over that first. This past Thursday, we issued 59.6 million of bonds. Fifth Thirds are underwriters. You can get the microphone.
59.
I could.
Is this better? This past Thursday, we issued 59.6 million in bonds out of our 64.6 million at Fifth Third as our underwriters. And actually, the market was very favorable for us, which is great. A few days prior to the going to market, the not good for stocks, but good for bonds. The yields were coming down in the 10-year Treasury, which of course plays in our favor. It's competition. People, price your bonds accordingly. Rates are coming down, so it worked out for us very well. We had a good day, good pricing. We'll have an additional $5 million that'll be issued in January in notes, and that'll give us our total of the 64.6 million. And the closing on the bonds will actually be this next week on the 18th, when we'll actually have transfer of funds and be able to invest those funds. Let the interest start growing on a little bit before we have to start turning dirt and actually start spending some dollars. But so no, smooth day for the bond sale, and I was very happy the way it turned out.
And our interest rate's a little bit better than it used to be.
Well, our credit rating,
No, our
our interest rate.
when we invest them.
Oh, yes, yeah, interest rates are up a little bit. You're probably looking at about, probably around 285 basis points, or 2.85% to 3% roughly right now. Is probably where it's going to be. There's a thing called arbitrage, and we're tax exempt debt. And of course, you can't earn more than what you're paying on the bonds because you're tax exempt. So we got to watch that also. I believe our arbitrage calculation was about 3.69, so we could go up to that level. So, but no, we're gonna get those invested and try to earn as much money and interest that we can legally.
That's good.
All right, thank you very much. All right.
All right, next I ask for the board's approval of the monthly financial reports and bank reconciliation.
I'll move.
Mr. Greens,
I'll second.
Ms. Grace?
Included is the November month ending financial report bank reconciliation, which includes the listed investments. Also included is a appropriation summary, a budget summary for the these are of course all for the general fund, listing of revenue, and also a financial summary for all the funds within the district.
All right, no questions, roll call, please.
Mr. Cremains,
Yes.
Ms. Grice,
Yes.
Mr. Siebert,
Yes.
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Mr. Nay.
Oh, yeah.
Did you say yes?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Sorry.
Next, I ask for the board's approval of contracts as listed.
I'll move.
Ms. Janay?
Second.
Mr. Cremines?
The two contracts listed are one with the Countryside YMCA, that of course is for our swim team. Very slight change in the cost. They went up $2 per lane per hour. That's actually not too bad. We've had the same lane prices for at least the last 4 years. So this is our first increase that I've seen. And then the second contract is Legend Webworks, same company we've been using. The $2,000 is essentially for this setup and also an app this year. It's a couple $100 more, I believe, than what we were in the past. But as you remember, the revenue actually offsets this fee, so we end up not paying anything based on the revenue coming in.
Okay, if there are no questions, roll call, please.
Mr. Cremains,
Yes.
Ms. Grice,
Yes.
Mr. Siebert,
Yes.
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Mr. Nay.
Yes.
Thank you. Next, I ask for the board's approval of Resolution 18016 to participate in the Ohio School Board Assistance Legal Assistance Fund.
I'll move.
Ms. Grace?
Second.
Mr. Cremines?
What is that for, sir?
The Legal Assistance Fund, this is for calendar year 2019. It's actually, it's $250. It does two things. One, they work on statewide issues that promote schools, and then also they actually are available for us to essentially be supplemental to our district attorney that we have. So if
Okay.
you have some additional questions, you call them up once and you'll pay for the $250.
That's true.
If there are no questions, roll call, please.
Mr. Siebert,
Yes.
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Mr. Nay, Mr. Cremines,
Yes.
Ms. Grice.
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I have.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Gunn. All right, this time, we will entertain the superintendent's reports and recommendations. Mr. Power?
Thank you. I'd ask the board's approval for the personnel items listed under number 1.
Ms. Janay?
Second.
Mr. Siebert? Could you explain this hiring form here at the bottom? Why we have this hiring form at the bottom of that? Is it something that we should be?
It's not really a form, is it?
It's a listing.
It's just a listing.
It's just a
not
listing,
form.
okay.
Yeah,
It's there, I didn't
Yeah.
know, when I see it was added to that, I
It
did.
says,
it's just,
So it's just.
it's a listing.
it's just a list of everything that's on our other.
That's actually an electronic listing of what is actually,
Got it.
it's not personnel that we're asking you.
Okay. That's a good question, okay. There are no questions, roll call, please.
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Mr. Nay,
Yes.
Mr. Cremines,
Yes.
Ms. Grice,
Yes.
Mr. Siebert.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd ask the board's approval of the board policy updates listed in number 2.
So moved.
Mr. Siebert,
Second.
Ms. Janay? Not very exciting, so if there are no questions, we will move for a roll call.
Mr. Nay,
Yes.
Mr. Cremines,
Yes.
Ms. Grice,
Yes.
Mr. Siebert,
Yes.
Mr. Haas.
Yes.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Power. Okay, at this time, under new business, the Warren County Career Center report.
Well, we haven't had our meeting, but I do have, I don't need that.
Oh, yeah,
They can't hear. It's not fair that they come out, they can't hear.
All right.
There you go.
We haven't had our meeting, it's Thursday night, but I do have some information. We are only one of 2 career centers that received the Purple Star designation. It's for our supporting of veterans, and our breakfast has really grown and grown, and it's really something. So if you ever have a chance to go to our Veterans Day program, it's really great. Our superintendent and our treasurer host get-togethers with the staff every so often. They sit down and touch base, and just any questions that the staff has or anything that they want to share, they have a discussion there. We had our sophomore open house, and they've already taken in 250 applications, and there's more coming in. We set our board meetings. We also set, we're going to set, we go ahead and preset when our students compete out of state. We set that up already so that there's no problem with that. Our students also, almost every other month, go to Rotary and give a little speech on what they do. So that's well received. Also, we do the same thing that we do here. We get the resignations and hiring of personnel. We also joined OSBA. That's going to be on there. And we also will be doing agreements, contracts, and memorandums of understanding. So it's all in all, we will have a good meeting on Thursday.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Grice. Okay, thank you. At this time, our next board meeting is January the 8th, Tuesday, 6:30 here at the Media Center. Is that correct, Mr. Power? We're going to use the Media Center?
That's not our regular board meeting, though.
I'm sorry, you're correct. That's the organizational meeting. And that's the one, will we also have the work session in that?
Right.
Okay, so it will all-
Basically, we'll have the budget hearing, we'll have the organizational meeting, and then we'll have a special board meeting, so you'll have to adjourn from the
Right.
organizational meeting to go into the special.
Special. Okay. And that is on January the 8th, and it will start at 6:30, 6:30. And Mr. Gonda, will you do the budget meeting before that?
Absolutely, I
At
will.
6 o'clock?
Usually around 6:15, I'll do the tax budget
6:15?
hearing.
All right. So 6:15, we'll have the budget. 6:30, we'll have the organizational, and then following that, we'll go into special meeting for the work session.
And we're gonna have food, right? That's important.
I think I got that covered.
All right. Just check.
Okay, also, if you'll notice, there are first readings for new job descriptions for the gifted intervention, which is also in your packet, and also the assistant AD. And community comments on non-agenda items.
No one has signed that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Coates. Okay, at this time, if we have no other new business, I will need a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Ms. Grice?
Second.
Mr. Cremines? Roll call, please.
Mr. Siebert,
Yes.
Mr. Haas,
Yes.
Ms. Jernay,
Yes.
Mr. Cremines,
Yes.
Ms. Grice.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out.
Executive session.